Welcome back everyone to another NASCAR Heat 5 setup video. In today's video, we're going to focus on the Cup cars at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Just because we're focusing on the Cup cars does not mean that the information is not applicable to both Xfinity and the trucks as well, and we'll talk about some adjustments for them also. So with that in mind, let's head to the track. Before we hop into the details of the setup itself, let's first talk a little bit about the track and the design of the setup. The track itself, of course, has extremely long straightaways on both the front and back stretch, which means that the most important corners to master is the entry of turn 2 and turn 4. The reason why I say the entry is because this is one place you do not want to overdrive the entry of those corners. The idea is to make those straightaways as long as we possibly can, spend as much time at full throttle. And getting the entry to turn 2 and turn 4 right means that we can do just that. We can get back to the gas early in turns 2 and 4 and maintain that full throttle all the way down the front and the back stretch. So make sure, above all else, that you get that right. And then on a more broader note, it is very important not to overdrive the entries to 1 and 3 as well, simply because it's going to kill your momentum, wash you up the track, and probably cost you several positions, especially early in a run when everybody is grouped together. So pay very close attention to the entry, make sure you hit your marks, and do not overdrive there. Now this setup, just as with all my setups, is focused on tire wear, and in particular, the tire wear relationship between the right front and the right rear. In order to get the right front and the right rear to wear very close to one another within a few percent by the end of a run, it means that the car is going to be a little bit on the tight side. So keep that in mind. This is made for a long run. This is not a qualifying setup. If you want this to turn into a qualifying setup, you're going to need to loosen the car up because there's quite a bit of additional speed to be found by simply loosening the car up. So again, what we're talking about today is a balanced setup with regards to tire wear, and then we're also going to talk about some ways that you can loosen and or tighten the car based on your individual needs. Getting started with the shock settings, I wanted a quicker overall feel from the car. So we're going to talk about multiple ways that this setup is a stiffer feel than some of the other setups that I've done here on the channel. The reason for that is these long straightaways lead into very tight corners. And so we need to carry maximum speed. We need the car to rotate and maintain that speed through the entry, center, and then off the exit of each corner. So with that, I wanted a stiffer platform. And one of the ways we do that is with higher numbers on the shock settings. Now, I could have gone more aggressive than this, but I like to stay between that 10 and 15 range. So here you can see that the bump settings 10 across the board, while 15 is the choice on rebound. So that's going to make the car have quicker transitions into and off the corner. So if you want to soften that a bit, if you want a little bit more roll out of the car, a little bit more forgiveness out of the car, then simply drop these numbers, maybe 10s across the board, or drop them as low as 6 to 8 range, and that will certainly change the feel of the car overall if you don't want quite as stiff of a feel from the car. Weight settings. Maximum left side weight, 54.2%. Nothing changed there. Front weight is, once again, somewhere around 52%. I have found that I can go as much as a full percent above or below this number, but usually I like to stick somewhere around 52%, especially on a track this big and this fast, simply because of the stability it gives me. The higher the number you use on the front weight, the tighter overall the car is going to be. The lower the front weight, the looser the car is going to be. The quicker it's going to want to rotate, and the more it's going to want to rotate overall. I prefer somewhere around 52% because it gives me the stability I need. I don't want the car to rotate so much that it gets unstable, and 52% gives me that amount. But as always, feel free to adjust that up or down based on your individual needs. The wedge is maxed out at 55%. This goes a long way toward helping your tire wear situation. So if you're trying to balance up the right front and the right rear, more wedge will put more pressure on the right front, take some pressure off the right rear and save that right rear. So obviously if we lower the wedge number, that's going to put more on the right rear, less on the right front. It's also going to add a lot of speed to the car. So one of the things you can do if you're looking to free up the car, say for example, for a qualifying type run or a short run type car where you know you're not going to need to run all the laps and save your tires, then drop that wedge number, and that is definitely going to help the car to rotate and carry more speed into and off the corners. Now let's move over to the spring settings. 800 on the left front, 1200 on the right front. Right front is maxed out at 1200 simply because I like that stable platform, something to lean on as I'm going through the corners. It helps to stabilize the car so that the car doesn't roll over on the right front and become unstable, particularly as fast as we're going through these corners. However, if you feel like the car is just too tight, you just can't get it to turn as much as you want to, then lower the right front spring. Decrease that number, and it's going to help the car to rotate more overall. Left front spring is the opposite. The more we increase the left front spring, the more the car will want to rotate, the looser it will be on corner entry. And it also serves to tighten up the car a little bit on corner exit, but primarily we're concerned about the entry of the corner with the front springs. So if you want to tighten the car up on corner entry, then one of your options is to decrease that left front spring. Moving on to the rear of the car, 600 pounds on both the left rear and the right rear. That means no split in the rear springs. That is there to stabilize the car and to save that right rear tire over the course of a long run. So just like we talked about with the wedge number, the more split you put in the rear springs, the looser the car is going to be, the more speed you're going to be able to carry within reason. So if you find that the car is just too tight on corner exit, you just cannot carry the speed, cannot get the car to rotate enough, then one of your options is to reduce the left rear spring to something like 550, test that, or even go down to 500 pounds and test 100 pounds of split in the rear tires, and that should certainly help free the car up on exit. Tire pressure settings, somewhere between 17 and 18 on the left sides has worked well for me, 39 and 37 on the rights. As always, I like to go a little bit on the lower end for my air pressures. I just simply prefer the feel of the car. However, the higher the tire pressure settings you use, the more straight line speed you will get. So the car will be quicker on the straightaway with higher tire pressures. It reduces the rolling resistance, making the car easier to gain speed on the straightaway. However, if you get the tire pressures too high, then you can sacrifice some grip in the corner. So it's something to play around with there, feel versus overall straight line speed. Miscellaneous settings, +3 and -3 on the camber. You can get by with more camber than this. Just like with other tracks, I've tested more camber, particularly in the right front. So you can get by with it. However, for tire wear purposes, I like to stay somewhere around -3 there or thereabouts for the most part. But again, you can get more aggressive should you decide that it is in your best interest to find more speed. Front sway bar maxed out at 2.0. That goes back to what I was talking about at the very beginning about having a stiffer platform. Using a stiffer or bigger front sway bar gives a tighter feel overall to the car. It reduces the amount of roll you have in the chassis, which is exactly what I'm looking for, particularly at a track like this. However, if you prefer a little bit more roll in the car, a little bit more forgiveness in the car, then drop this front sway bar by 1 to 2 clicks and give it a try. The front sway bar is a major adjustment to the car, so I wouldn't suggest going several adjustments here at one given time unless you're going to make adjustments through the entire rest of the car to compensate for that. So minor adjustments to the front sway bar can lead to very big changes in the handling. Now moving on to the track bar, left side at 15, right side at 14. So one of the things I wanted to do, because we're using maximum wedge and we've got 52% front weight, which reducing that front weight would certainly help find a little bit more speed, helping the car to rotate more overall. However, I needed those two numbers to be higher in order to save that right rear tire and equalize the tire wear a little bit. So the way I try to combat that and still keep the car rotating is with the track bar. A higher track bar is going to keep that car rotating particularly through the center and on exit of the corner. We use the left side of the track bar for the entry into the corner, meaning that the higher the left side, the looser the car will be on entry, the better it will turn on the entry to the corner. The lower we use on the the left side, the tighter the car will be on the entry. The right side is more for the exit of the corner. So the higher the number we use on the right side track bar, the looser the car will be on corner exit. And the opposite is also true. The lower the number we use on the right side, the tighter the car will be overall on the exit. So here, a little bit higher on the left as opposed to the right, simply to help save that right rear a little bit. Again, we can make the car much faster by loosening it up. However, it won't work out very well on a long run unless you're prepared to deal with the right rear getting a little bit slippery as you get closer and closer to the end of the run. The brake bias at 78%, somewhere around 78 to 80% is the most stable platform for me on brake bias. However, it will really ultimately depend on how you use the brakes. If you prefer to help the car rotate using the brakes, in other words, trying to trail brake it a little bit into the corner, then you might want a little bit lower number here, because the lower number on the brake bias will loosen the car up under heavy braking. Higher number will tighten the car up under heavy braking. Personally, I don't use very much brake at all, especially if I'm in open track. Obviously, if you're in traffic, everything changes. You might have to use more brake, change your braking markers, and so on. But in general, 78 to 80% is about what I would prefer to use. However, if I know I'm going to have to trail brake the car a lot, then I'm going to drop this to around 75 to 72 maybe, as low as maybe 70%. However, the lower you get, the more unstable the car wants to become, particularly in this game. It doesn't seem to favor lower brake bias numbers. So keep that in mind. But again, lower brake bias going to help the car rotate, make it looser under braking. Higher numbers will tighten it under braking. Grill tape, I didn't really mess with a whole lot. 50% did not have the car overheating at all, so I stuck with that. But you might be able to get even more aggressive with that. Just remember, as long as you don't get the car overheating, you're going to be fine. Wheel lock and steering offset are at my defaults of 10 degrees and 0.05. In general, the wheel lock is to help adjust the sensitivity of the steering, the quickness of the steering. Higher numbers here, and you're going to get a quicker feel, quicker reaction out of the car to your steering inputs. Lower numbers here, such as 6 to 8 or even lower, and you will get slower reaction. So you're going to have to put more wheel in it to get the same reaction out of the car. This is all about feel. And for me, 10 degrees works very well. I could adjust it a little bit up or a little bit down on a per track basis, but for me, for the purposes of these videos, it is much better to find a good middle ground, and 10 degrees works best for that. Steering offset is tied very closely to the amount of pull to the right that you want to have to do with the steering wheel. So we know down the straightaways with the setup of the car, all the way to the left and everything we've done to get the car to turn, the car's going to want to pull hard to the left, even on the straightaways. The steering offset can help to offset that a little bit. The higher the number, the more it's going to offset that. However, if you get too high with this number, then you can actually introduce a pull to the right on the straightaway, which is certainly not something that we want. So play around with this number, but 0.05 works very well for me, as I'm used to having to turn the steering wheel to the right some going down the straightaway. Finally, on to the gear settings. First, second, and third, these are the numbers that I prefer to be around on a per track basis. So 3, 2, and 1.4. So those work very well for me based on how I like to get through the gears, how I like to accelerate through the gears. The rear end ratio at 325, there is tons of room to adjust this. You can certainly go higher than this, which will cause the car to turn more RPMs, or you can go lower, down around 310 or even lower, and that will turn fewer RPMs. This is going to vary a huge amount just based on whether or not you're in clean air, whether or not you're on fresh tires or worn tires. If you're drafting with several other cars, a lot of things can change this. So the ultimate final number you're going to choose for the rear end ratio is going to be dependent upon how many cars you're going to be racing about, or you think you're going to be racing with, how fast they are, what kind of draft you're going to be getting, how strong that draft is, and so on. So there's a lot of adjustability in really all facets of this car, but overall I designed it to be nice and stable, but also have good tire wear and good speed. So that's going to do it for the Cup cars. Again, we're not going to go into detail about Xfinity or Trucks, but in general, the Xfinity cars and the trucks are a little bit tighter overall for me, so I'm going to look at ways to loosen the car up. And in this case, I'm going to be looking for things such as, I'm going to test out this left rear spring. I'm probably going to drop it to about 550 and see if that helps. See what that does to my tire wear versus the amount of speed I pick up. The other big change I would be looking to make is in the wedge department. I would probably test out using 54% wedge, maybe even lower, to see if I can gain more speed, get a better feel out of the car, have it more neutral without hurting the right rear tire wear too much. So those are the first two avenues I would be looking for in order to free up the car for either Xfinity or trucks. But there are certainly more options. You could even turn to the shock settings and get even more aggressive with those to help rotate the car. So that's going to do it for today. Thank you very much for joining me, and stay tuned for more NASCAR Heat 5.